Tonight, though, we are, of course, here for Two Languages, One Community with poets Michael Warr and Chun Yu. Two Languages, One Community brings together African-American and Chinese-American writers in a rare cultural exchange based on dialogue and storytelling. Workshop participants write poems and short stories based on memories sparked by photographs of their parents, their younger selves, and other family members. The writing is translated into Chinese and English and published online at twolanguagesoncommunity.com and in the Catching Memory book series. I'll put that link in the chat shortly. You can order books by both authors from Booksmith, and I'll drop a link for that in the chat as well. Michael Warr's books include Of Poetry and Protest, From Emmet Till to Trayvon Martin, edited by Michael Warr, that came out from W.W. Norton, and from Tia Chucha Press, The Armageddon of Funk, We Are All the Black Boy, and Power Lines, a decade of poetry from Chicago's Guild Complex. In 2017, he was named a San Francisco Library Laureate. Other poetry honors include a Creative Work Fund Award for his multimedia project Tracing Poetic Memory in Bayview, Hunters Point, Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Award for Excellence in Literature, Black Caucus of the American Library Association Award, Gwendolyn Brooks Significant Illinois Poets Award, and a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship for Poetry. Michael is the former deputy director of the Museum of the African Diaspora and has extensive experience in community-based arts. He became a board member of the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library in 2018. And it was recently announced that he will receive this year's Lifetime Achievement Award from the Berkeley Poetry Festival. So big congratulations to you for that, Michael.
Thank you.
You can all follow his creative work at michaelwarr-creativework.tumblr.com. And I'll drop that in the chat as well. Chun Yu, PhD, is the author of the multi-award-winning memoir Little Green from Simon & Schuster and a historical graphic novel in progress from Macmillan, and more. Her work has been published in the award-winning anthology Veterans of War, Veterans of Peace, Open Doors, Boston Herald, MIT Tech Talk, and others. Her new bilingual poetry collection in English and Chinese and her graphic novel on Chinese immigration experience have won San Francisco Arts Commission Cultural Equity and Individual Artist Grants. Her work merges science, art, and spirituality based on her experiences as an immigrant from an ancient culture undergoing revolution to a new world of transformative science and technologies. She's won support from the Zellerbach Foundation and Poets and Writers, amongst others, for her community work in poetry and writing. Chun holds a BS and MS from Peking University and a PhD from Rutgers in chemistry and was a postdoctoral fellow at a Harvard-MIT joint program. Her website is www.chunyu.org. A few house items before we get started. Obviously you're muted, but I encourage you to show the poet some love in the chat. Also, if you have a question at any point, please feel free to ask in the chat. We'll have time for a Q&A at the end of the program. We do have a one-strike policy in the chat. Please, no hate speech or trolling. If I see any of that, we'll be forced to remove you from the event and you won't be able to get back in. So don't do that to yourself and don't do that to us. If you'd like to order any of the author's books, as I mentioned, you can do that through Booksmith. Links are forthcoming here in the chat. I think that's it for me. So without further ado, I'm very happy to turn it over to Michael Warr and Chun Yu. Thank you both for joining us, and thanks everyone for being here tonight.
Yeah, so it's great to be here. It's good to see everyone, and we've been sharing this work that we've been doing for a while now, for a couple of years. And I always wanted to have my poetry translated into Chinese, and I tried quite a few ways to get that done, and things that normally work for me, reaching out to my network, strategizing, doing all kinds of planning, and it wasn't working. So I decided, okay, I'm gonna put that on the back burner and come back to it sometime. And then I was doing a reading at Fort Mason that had been organized by Jack Hirschman, one of San Francisco's former poet laureates. And Chun was in the audience, and we started talking after the event. We actually met the next day, got together, and we started exchanging work. And ever since then, we started with her translating some of my poems and me starting to do some editing, because Chun writes both in English and Chinese. And after doing that for a while, we decided to start the workshop, Two Languages, One Community. So what we're doing tonight reflects that part of what we do. And we do have a book coming out called Catching Memory, which will include the poetry and prose that we worked with some writers on. And once that book comes out, we'll be featuring some of the writers in that book. So, Chun, did you want to add
yes,
anything?
I am.
Read?
Okay. I think I will let you go read your poetry first. Then I will, I will talk more during my, my own part. So I am going to share the screen. Share use slideshow. Okay.
You can go.
Yeah. Here, right?
So that happens to be the cover of the book that we worked on, and it should be coming out this fall. We do have a website though where you can see it in progress, and that's at twolanguagesoneCommunity.com. And these images are of our mothers. And when we first started writing, we really were sharing poems about our families. And the workshop that we did also used the theme of family to get people exchanging their experiences. And in that process, you find similarities, you find things to hold on that you have experienced from dramatically different cultures. And the image in the upper right-hand corner is of my mother. And when people would see that image, they would have the same reaction that I had when I first saw it, which is she looks like a movie star. And but my mother used to tell me these stories of how she would be teased at school and how people would tease her because she was so black, and as if that was a problem. And the fact that she's so beautiful, but her blackness brought that kind of response is what prompted me to write this poem. It's short and it's called Black Star, and Chun will read it in Chinese afterwards. Black Star, Gaynell War, 1932 to 2015. She was named Shinola, outside her name, as slight against her blackness, by lost souls caught inescapably in her dark attraction and blinded by her radiance in the sky.
黑明星作为对他的黑的蔑视，他被那些失落在他无法逃脱的黑色的吸引力中，和被他在天空中耀眼的光芒照瞎了眼睛的灵魂们，外号为西努拉斜游。I want to talk a little bit here about the Shinola translation, because I had no idea what that was. I grew up in China. We didn't have Shinola. So I looked it up. It was a fashion brand and in China. So it kind of evolved into something else. So these are the things we encounter in translation. So I debated a few times. So eventually I decided to give it a Chinese name, which is the Xinula Shushina in the last line. Yeah, so, okay.
Yeah, so, when in the translation process, we have a lot of discussion, and I don't know how many of you have been translated before, but for me, this was the third or fourth language I'd been translated into. And the first time I was translated, it was into Haitian. And I had no contact with the translator. I just saw the poem when it came out. The second time it was in German, and I had a lot of discussion with the translator. And it was amazing the kind of depth of conversation we had to have. And that is what has happened with Chun and I. So when we were discussing this word Shinola, I didn't even know that this shoe polish company had become a luxury design company, and that it's the same company. So that's just part of the process.
Let's move on. Yeah. Okay. So
this next poem is Hallucinating at the Velvet Lounge, and it's dedicated to a wonderful trombone player named Malachi Thompson. And I'm going to read it out of my It's in my second book, The Armageddon of Funk. Hallucinating at the Velvet Lounge. When Malachi blew his horn, I dreamed of cornbread, yellow mounds with burnt edges on the velvet's culinary altar. His sharp cut riffs morphed into squares of cornbread islands, floating in streams of warm butter, clinging to the ribs of my memory, speaking in trumpet tongues of passages and uprisings, ancient pain and good times jiving, sacred beats and blues timing, drive-by crime and signifying, an opiate inside of oppression, a cratered chunk of bacon-infused sweet potato, chicken smothered, maple pecan, custard-filled, smackling, crackling, jalapeno-inflamed cornbread, the crepe of the slaves now sold at Whole Foods in this jazz-drenched town built of golden bricks and smokestacks, billowing fumes of corn on the cob and catfish, my mind lost in music and metaphysics, reminiscing the Sunday manna served beside my mother's succotash.
Okay, so it's really a fun time to translate this piece. I love cornbread. It made me really hungry. And so I'm going to read that now in Chinese. 天鹅绒酒吧里的幻想，致马拉基汤普森。当马拉奇吹响他的号，我梦想起玉米饼，金黄带着焦边，堆积在天鹅绒酒吧美食盛坛般的舞台上。它轮廓鲜明的即兴重复段演变为玉米饼的方阵，在黄油中漂浮，攀附在我记忆的肋骨上，以小号的语调，段落与起伏，古老的痛苦与好时光共跳着摇摆舞。神圣的节奏和蓝调的定时，是飞车枪击般的悲泣与无奈下的嬉闹搞笑，还有压迫下的鸦片麻醉，填满培根、甜薯、焖鸡，盖满枫糖山核桃，奶黄让人直咂嘴巴的被辣椒点燃的玉米饼，奴隶的饼。在这个绝世淫逸、金色砖块砌成的城市里的全食超市里出售，叠叠烟囱喷吐着玉米和鲶鱼的烟气。我的头脑迷失在音乐与形而上学中，思念着我母亲的扁豆玉米羹旁边的玉米饼，星期天的神凉美味。
Thank you, Chun. I selected that poem to contrast to the first poem because from my perspective, it looks like the second one, not just based on the length, the different lengths of the poem, but the language of it. It seemed like it would be more complicated, a lot more complicated to translate. So I'm just curious, Chun, if you could speak to that. Is that assumption correct?
It is. This is a challenging poem, I have to say, because it has a lot of references in it. It talks about music, and even religion, and then a certain kind of cuisine. So it also makes it a lot of fun, and there are so much senses too, and there are lots of metaphor. So this is quite an experience to translate. Yeah, because Michael and I both write a pretty broad range of poems. I also translate my own poetry, and every one is the translation process is quite dramatically different. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is that the theme is another theme that we found we were writing in common, and that is about food.
Yes, we all love food. if people just only think about food, we'll have world peace.
So I'm going to read one more, and this is a poem that is it's an excerpt from a serial poem that I've been writing since 2018. And it's a poem that I continue to update because I'm adding the names of Black people who've been shot by the police. And this poem it references many, of course, not all of the names. So I'm only going to share about a third of the poem to tonight. And it's called What Not to Do, an unfinished poem. And Chun has also translated this poem. We won't read it tonight, but I thank her for that, because we also try to work together on poems that are relevant to the time that we're in. So this is a short version of What Not to Do, an unfinished poem. Breathe, Eric Garner choked. Sell, Lucy's. Resist to death. Stand, Amadou Diallo, in vestibule. Carry, wallet. Look out of place. Act suspicious. 41 fired, 19 bullets kill. Park, China Haggerty, on side of road. Talk, on cell, on side of road. Shot, on side of road. Drive, Philando Castile with broken brake lights. Carry, legal firearm. Announce you have a gun. Shout, not wearing, not reaching for gun. Shot, 5 bullets, 2 to heart. Approach, Oscar Grant, the police. Beg not to shoot. Kneel, shot anyway, in back. Carry, Tamil Rice, toy gun, shot with real bullets. Carry, Remain Brisbane, prescription bottle, shot, 2 bullets to torso. Not carry, Keith Lamont Scott, a gun when told to drop it, shot. B, Natasha McKinnon. B, superhuman. B, John Crawford, an imminent threat. Shop for Walmart air rifle. Carry Walmart air rifle at Walmart. Talk on cell phone at Walmart. Shot with real bullets at Walmart. B, George Floyd, a suspect. B, a 6'7" Black man. B, claustrophobic, asphyxiated, knee on neck while handcuffed. Run, Stephen Clark through grandmother's yard. Carry, cell phone, shot, 20 bullets fired, 8 hit, primarily in back. Jog, Ahmaud Arbery, shot, 2 bullets killed while hunted. Sleep, Breonna Taylor in bed, shot, 8 bullets killed. Sleep, Rashard Brooks at Wendy's. Flee for daughter's birthday. Point, did taser over shoulder, shot, 2 bullets in back. Walk, Elijah McClain, home. Look, sketchy. Play music. Wear ski mask. Shop for iced tea. Carry iced tea. Act crazy. Explain, can't breathe. Display superhuman strength. Beg to go home. Be anemic. Be suspicious. Be on something. Choked to death. Breathe. Thank you. So we'll be bringing that to you in Chinese in the future.
Possibly in the next event, yeah, the upcoming event on September the 3rd with the McKenna Institute Library. I plan to, if Michael agrees, I plan to read the Chinese version.
And I'll put that in the chat I'll put that information in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we move to my work? Yeah, share. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, so I will start by introducing my first book. It's called Little Green, and it's published by Simon Schuster. It's a memoir in free verse. In this book, I tell the story of growing up during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. And actually, I was born at the very beginning of it. So I'm going to just share the opening of this book. I was born in a small city near the East Sea when the Great Cultural Revolution began. My name is Xiaoqing, Little Green. My country, 中国, the Middle Kingdom. When I was 10 years old, our leader died and the revolution ended. And this is how I remember it. And this is how I look during that time with my older brother, and we were holding the little red book of Chairman Mao, and it's winter time, and I want to point out the shoes we are wearing. These cotton shoes are handmade by our grandmother. I tell you where this is leading to. This is our dear grandmother. She made shoes like this for us. And the two little ones here, the two sets here, actually I have them now here in San Francisco. And so because of the Cultural Revolution, my father was sent to the countryside to be re-educated. My mother was teaching in the country middle school, and it is a very usual situation for my generation of Chinese growing up. So many of us were actually at least partially brought up by our grandparents. So because our family are often split, and my mom, she has to teach during the day, and at night, almost all of the people, grown-ups, were required to participate in political studies of Maoism, Marxism. And so we were locked up at home, my brother and I. So all of the grandparents stepped in. So we spent a lot of time in the countryside with her. And when we were little, and we grew cotton in our area. So I went to the field. We all followed her, whoever was with her, to the field to pick cotton. And so I learned about the history and the fate of the Black people here during the time, when I first went to school. It's taught in Chinese history. And so I had never saw a foreigner before, because China was so isolated from the rest of the world. We had our grand revolution. And so when I heard this story, what I can think of, because there were stories about the Black people were enslaved here. They picked cottons and in the field. So I, as a child, made that connection, because I could not otherwise imagine how those people were and how their lives were. But I understand what it is like to pick cotton, and what cotton means for us, like all of us, and because we all need to stay warm, and then cotton has been in our history and life for thousands of years. It's very deep psychologically. So my poem, Cotton, I actually wrote it very recently after our Asian Art Museum event. I felt really inspired. And this poem came out of me within 1 hour. So cotton, all I could think of was little black hands picking and picking snow white cotton. When I was a child, learning about your people's fate on the other side of the ocean in a winter classroom with no heating, my country, red and deep in revolution, isolated from the world. I heard slavery, a term ancient and distant, re-denounced in the land where I sat with frozen toes, trembling with indignation and a yearning for justice, the original Shan, the pure goodness at the heart of a child. Revolution or not, red, black, or other. I had never met a child of another color. All I could think of was little black faces smiling like blooming cotton flowers, bursting warmth in a summer harvest. All I could think of was little black hands giving warm white cotton away. Little black hands snatched away from black hands of mama and grandma. Little black hands forever lost in the vast world. Little black hands forever reaching at a loss. Little black hands forever wiping tears, clear and salty, just like my own when I missed my mama. As I snuggled next to my grandma under an ancient oil lamp, her hands roughened from cotton picking for the ism and the revolution, which we must all love and give everything to. Stitching and cushioning shoes night after night with the few handfuls of cotton rationed to her and a long thread she spun with a wooden spindle, spinning since the beginning of time and a memory to keep my feet warm. Little black hands, where was your cotton? Where was your thread? Where were your mama and a grandma? I had never met a child of another color. When I learned your history as a child, all I could feel was your ocean of tears flooding into the yellow sea, rushing the shore 100 miles away. Thank you. I want to show this picture painting. It's by my sister. She's my younger sister. You saw my brother and I. My sister is a very talented painter. So she painted this so you can see how deeply the cotton, the whole image of cotton influenced our life. And she gifted this to me because she knows what it means to me. So this all happened before I wrote the poem. It has been in my mind for a long time. And so that's why it came out in such a short period of time. And of course, I showed it to Michael and another friend of mine. I only showed it to 2 people and they made some suggestions, but it was, it's, I think this is the work meant to be and at the right time. It happens once in a while. I hope I write a poem like this every week, but it takes time. Life takes time. So I actually came back, and so now back to the 2 languages, 1 community project. I came back the end of January, right before all of the direct flights were canceled from China for this event scheduled to be in the Chinese New Year February 15th. When I came back, Wuhan already locked down for a week. I was debating if I should come here. And I asked Chinese Culture Center if they consider cancel the event. They said, no, the city don't foresee foresee serious danger here, although now it's a different situation. But I was really so happy I did this event. Actually, my mother was in the hospital. I was heartbroken. I was there with her for 4 months, but I wanted to fulfill this commitment and thinking maybe I will go back to there soon. But we all know the situation now. So many of us are separated from our beloved ones. So I want to share this other little poem I wrote for my parents. It was published by the Poem of the Day of San Francisco Public Library, curated by the current Poet Laureate Kim Shuk. And they actually published the bilingual version. The Chinese version was published on Xinhua Daily while I was in China with my parents. And so this is a very special poem. And I often say this little poem have won the United Nations of Tears around the world. So I go with the English version first. The map. When I was born, your bosom was a map. I occupied all of it in your cradling arms. When I began to walk, your eyesight was a map. I learned my steps, toddling and waddling in your adoring gaze. When I started school, your mind became a map. I ventured out and back, morning and night, in your unceasing care. When I grew up and left home, from hometown to other towns, home country to other countries, your heart became the map. I searched far and wide, high and low, for my direction and a place in the world, in your loving thoughts. Whenever I set out for a journey, I asked for my destination. You asked for my destination, studied an open map, and each time accurately located the point of my being. Then one day you picked up a magnifying glass, eyes moving closer and closer, hands trembling more and more. Finally, at a loss, no longer seeing clearly the lines and the points on the map, you hold me in your heart. Gradually growing old, one day you can only walk in my eyesight, fumbling steps, every trip outside, an adventure. From now on, I will walk by your side so you can lean on my arms when we are at a loss, not knowing where to go. Love is the map. Thank you. With this poem, I will read the Chinese version too. 地图，刚出生时，你的胸怀是一张地图，我是那地图的全部，在你的怀抱中。刚走路时，你的目光是一张地图，我在那地图中 遥遥学步，在你的注视中。上学时，我走出了家门，你的脑海是一张地图，我在那地图中朝出暮归，在你的牵挂中。长大后，我离开了家，从故乡到外乡，从祖国到异国，你的心是一张地图，我在那地图中摸索方向，寻找位置，在你的想念中。每当我开始一个新的旅程，你会打开一张地图，询问我的去处，时时都能准确找到我的所在。后来，你拿起了放大镜，眼睛离地图越来越近，手抖得越来越厉害。终于茫然中，你已经看不清地图上的点与线。我在你的心里。渐行渐慢，有一天，你只能在我的目光里蹒跚。每一次出行都是一场冒险。从此，我将把你搀扶在我的臂弯。当我们茫然不知所向，爱是一张地图。Finally, I want to share another short poem. And I wrote this on the Chinese Memorial Day. It's called Today. It was April 3rd here, April 4th in China. It was a Memorial Day there. And that was a day when a million people were diagnosed and tens of thousands died here, but that number has increased many folds. But for me, that seems to be a very symbolic day for this whole event. Today, the world has fallen ill. Today, a million have been diagnosed. Today, tens of thousands have left us. Today, the door to heaven is crushed. Today, angels in white are fighting on earth for us. Today, a virus is forcing all nations into a united front. Today, we humans have to learn to become one. 今天世界病了，今天100万人确诊了，今天几万人已经走了，今天天堂的门被挤破了，今天白衣天使们在人间战斗，今天地球正被一个病毒统战，今天人类必须学会成为一体。So I have many friends coming from science. I have many friends who are working as medical workers or researchers in labs. They're all trying to make this work. And, I really hope we come to our senses and become united, because I don't see any other way to win, to win this battle. And so just, wish us all good luck. Well, thank you so much for listening. So shall we? Thank you. Shall we hear from the audience if there's any questions we can answer? Yvonne, you want to take over?
Yes, thank you, Chun and Michael, both. That was really wonderful. And something I needed very badly today. So I'm feeling a lot better. Thank you both for your readings and for your work. If any of you have questions for Michael or Chun, now's the time. You can ask them anything that your hearts desire, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer. I'll give you just a minute here to gather your questions. But Chun and Michael, I don't have any that have come in yet. So meanwhile,
we have two choices. Each of us can read another poem, and we can also talk about our creative process a bit more. What do you think, our host?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm curious what the process is for you guys. I know you talked a little bit about Michael mentioned earlier that that you'd had a few you've been translated into several languages before, and the process kind of varies a lot from time to time. So I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit more about what it's like on a typical collaboration or translation, if there is a typical one, or is each poem kind of a different process a little bit?
Why don't you speak to that, Chun, first?
Like it's for me, as I said before, I translate also my own poetry, and then some other poets. I'm very selective because it is such a consuming process, even for me to translate my own poetry, because a poem contains so much. And one of the reasons I don't ask other people to translate my poetry is because I don't want to put them through this hard process. I'm like, oh, maybe I should just do it myself. And some of it, for Michael's poetry, for example, the Black Star is a relatively easy, straightforward translation. But then the last line with the Shinola, lots of research went into that. And so we also talk about which poem to translate. Now we are also with a two-language one community project. We are inviting other American poets into our project. So we are in the process of selecting poems. So it's a mutual process, because we will ask the poets, like I asked Michael to choose a few poems first, right? Like 5 poems. Then I look at them, then I come back and we talk. And then, every poem depend on, every poem, the amount of work and is different, obviously. And as we said, the Velvet Lounge poem has music, has food, and it covers a very, very broad range of everything. So we end up talking about all of that. And then, some poems I will have to say no, and including my own poems. Some of them are just not translatable, especially the language, because in Chinese, I sometimes combine traditional Chinese and contemporary Chinese, because traditional Chinese is so beautiful. But I don't just straight use it, I build it into my story. So much of the beauty will be lost if I try to translate it. So it's really, it
so
depends.
I actually feel guilty sometimes, with some of the poetry I give Chun to translate, because it's my poetry is very, very dense. And one of the things that comes out of the experience for me is really paying attention to the difference in our writing. I find that inspirational. So sometimes, I pride myself on writing in different forms, but also I find myself you know, being influenced by the way that Chun writes. And I've been writing for a long time, so I'm definitely steeped in my own style. But I like experimentation. The poem What Not to Do, for instance, is a very experimental poem for me. It came from such a place that I didn't even know it if it was a poem, and I didn't care if it was a poem. It was something I needed to say, and I submitted it to a contest, and it was selected as one of the, you know, runner-up poems. So I kind of jokingly said to myself, well, I guess it's a poem. But the thing is that it was the message in that case that was really critical to me. And I was very moved when Chun decided to translate that poem. I mean, and like she mentioned at the Mechanic Institute, we'll do versions of that. So I want to encourage people to check in on that. But the other thing is I find that I think part of what helped our process is in the early stages of it, we found ourselves writing on similar themes, or at least those are some of the poems that were kind of pulled out of the pool of poems. So the poems about our mother, the poems about our family, you know, and when you're working closely with the translator, my experience is that you wind up having conversations that lead to other things. They might lead to new poems, but they also get you thinking about what you've already written. And I think that commonality of things was very, very helpful. I think that we're at a different point today. We might still cover some of those similarities and themes, but I think we're branching out into taking on, for instance, Chun taking on translating What Not to Do. And also, as she mentioned, the reading that we did at the Asian Art Museum a couple of weeks ago, coming out of that reading and being inspired to write a poem that had been percolating for quite a while. So yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that this it's not just about the translation, it's about interaction with other people as we do the workshops. It's also really picking things apart, words, ideas. And that's one of the things I love about working with translators is the kind of picking apart of culture and history. The things you have to break down the words to make sure of what the meaning is that you're trying to get across. So I encourage everybody to do it if you can find a translator.
The translator is willing to be tortured, but it's also so much fun once it comes together. It's very rewarding. So this is really a great process. At the beginning, I look at the what not to do and said, oh, I don't know if this is translatable, but I just feel it's a very, very important poem. The topic is very timely and it's an ongoing poem, right? So I said, maybe I can give it a try. I think it worked. I'm glad it worked, but for a while I was hesitating if I should do that. And also, as Michael mentioned, this process, it's very stimulating. Also we have been reading together or separately, we have quite a few events this summer. And the poem came out, and I had tried to write it from another perspective, and it has been in my mind for a long time. But that morning, all of a sudden, this image showed up of a little child, a Black child, picking cotton. I as a child, also emerged in the same time in one morning. And I had no clue if I would be able to manage to write, but there is a spark, and the one sentence emerged, and then I finished that in basically in an hour. And this poem is very special because I showed it to Michael and another dear friend of mine, Mish Hall, who's an amazing psychologist with the poet's sense, and he also writes poetry. Only two people I've shown this to, and they both agreed it worked. They made some word choice suggestions, which is always a process. And fortunately, they are so many tools around. I can search and I listen to them, then I compare. Finally, you have to make the decision. The decision is always in the person who is writing the poem. Also, if you're a translator, you have the final say for the other language. So yeah, so I have seen some other questions here. Jane asked how we met, right? So
they may have come in after I talked about that in my introduction.
Yeah, we can quickly talk about it.
I mentioned that I was actually for a long time looking to have my poetry translated into Chinese. And normally when I set my mind on something, it's pretty, I make it happen, but this wasn't happening. And so, June was at a reading that I was doing at Fort Mason that Jack Hirschman put together. And that's where we met. And we really started working together the very next day.
Yeah, I mean, we both read in Jack Hirschman's series. Jack hosts an amazing series with the public library. So at that time also, I started writing focused more on my Chinese poetry. So the timing was good. And if we met earlier, I might not, be able to do it because I was really occupied by my graphic novel projects. But at that time I started, because my university in China, Beijing University, Peking University, had a huge anniversary, 120th anniversary. My classmates asked me to write a poem. So I wrote it in Chinese, and that poem also I finished in a day or two. And I think all of my love to that place was put into that one poem. It was quite an experience. And then during that time, Michael, around that time, everything came together. And the map is also translated into French by my friend Mitch Hall. Next time I'll invite him to read it in French. So that's also a really wonderful experience, working with him, with a translator. So you have more questions?
Elaine was wondering if you plan to sell the book in Chinese stores as well. And also as a librarian, do you know if it will be available from vendors?
Our two, this is our 2 languages, 1 community, Catching Memory book, right? I think, she's referring to that. So we have the book designed, it's not in print yet. So we would love to sell the book in Chinese stores and put it in the library.
If you have any recommendations for stores that we could approach, please put it in the chat. We'd love to follow up on that. I'm on the board of the San Francisco Public Library, so friends of the San Francisco Public Library, so I know a lot of people there, and we definitely want to do some things with the library. It is a chapbook. But it actually, I think, reaches the page count for an official ISBN number. So we'll expand it. We'll be putting it out there in the world. Please stay in touch with our 2languages1community.com site just to kind of check in what we're doing with it.
Right. I see Hangao. Hangao is from the East Coast. He's asking when we will get to read your graphic novel. Should I answer that question? Well, I have been asked for the graphic novel for years because it's such a tremendous project. And sometimes, I tell people to stop asking me because this is a historical graphic novel about Chinese history and the poetry as a driving force in Chinese history. It covers the modern time, also the time about 1,000 years ago. So before Song Dynasty, I did about 10 years of research, and then I wrote the script. It took me a few years, and it's with my illustrator, brilliant illustrator. She has a huge task. I think we are halfway through, and I have, at least more than 10 chapters of beautifully illustrated book. And actually, because of this year's pandemic, and we are all cooped up at home, so some of us have worked more than usual, become more productive in certain ways. I think I am hoping she will finish this book the end of this year or next year. Yeah. So yeah, there is hope. It's coming. But yeah, this is going to be probably one of the most consuming book of my life. I don't intend to do another one like this. Next time I'd be very careful to agree to do a certain book. But it should be rewarding. I mean, I intend to introduce Chinese history in this graphic novel, and I think is a rising star kind of form of books, and many young people, especially young people, are reading it, right? So Yvonne, with your bookstore, you probably can tell us more about that.
Yeah. First the graphic novel, and then Netflix, I think, is how it works.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. more adventures. So also I have the other graphic novel, which is about the Chinese immigration story. That is ongoing too. And my illustrator and collaborator is award-winning animator Arnie Wang, who was the first director for Dora the Explorer. He did a lot of great books. So his family history of 100 years of the Wang family's immigration history. And I wonder how long that's going to take me. Hopefully less time, yeah. Thank you. So, do you have other questions?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Last call for questions. If anybody has a final question for Chun or Michael. Otherwise, I just want to thank you both again so much for being here tonight and for sharing your work. I encourage you all to stay in touch with the Two Languages, One Community project. I shared the link in the chat there and in the comments. I think just a lot of love in the chat. No more questions. To everyone who's watching, thanks for tuning in. You can support Michael and Chun and the Booksmith all at once by purchasing their books from us. I shared the links in the chat and in the comments. We'll ship them right to your door, or you can pick them up at Booksmith if that's easier for you. I hope that we can all meet in person in the nearest future. But until then, please take care and stay well, everyone. And I hope to see you again at some other virtual events in the near future.
Evan?
Yeah.
Yeah, can you just give me a second? I want to provide a link for people while you're still open for links.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Take your time.
And Chun, you should do the same if you have anything. I'm just going to provide some links for people to be able to.
Please do so. And I also have something. I have some. I met some friends in the audience ask me about if the Two Language One community should be broadened into, for example, English and Spanish, English and other languages. I mean, we would love to see that happen, but Michael and I don't speak it. Michael, do you have any hidden talents of other languages?
No, but some of my work is going to be translated in Spanish. I mean, I think what Chun is saying is that, yeah, we would love to see that and to see other projects like that, but that's going to have to come from other people with those particular skills.
We would love to.
Great idea.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I actually, my previous lab, formal lab at MIT, my advisor and one of my best Spanish friends, they are building programs for young girls to to study science and have adventures in all different fields, and including literature. We might collaborate with them, and so they have these different language component. So far for Michael and I, we've been only focused on English and the Chinese. I know the resource is out there and there. So if you we are happy to work with you, or in any way talk to people to expand this whole project. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Chair.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll follow up with more links in the Facebook page when we get them from Michael and Chun. So thank you, everybody. Please take care and stay safe out there, and hope to see you all soon.
Good night, everyone. Thanks, Evan.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.